Well, good afternoon. It's Crazy Cheap Chick, and today I'm going to tell you a story. So put on your jammies, get you a cup of hot cocoa, and sit back and relax because this may take some time. I'm going to tell you the story of how we got our homestead. My husband was a professional firefighter for over 20 years, so he was always required to live within the city limits of the town he protected. So our first house was in the city limits, but as close to the edge as we could get. But we were still in a neighborhood, though we always wanted to live in the country. Well, he took early retirement, and we started thinking about finally fulfilling that dream of moving to the country. And there were some other things too that were kind of playing into that decision. We lived in a nice neighborhood. We had a home we really liked. You get it all fixed up just the way you want. It was almost paid off, and we had flipped a house. There was a house in our neighborhood that went into foreclosure. We kind of kept an eye on it. We bid on it. We got it. And everyone should flip a house in order to know that they never need to flip another one. And we made fine money on that house, but it was stressful because we did all the work ourselves, or the majority of it ourselves. And that's the only way you can really make, I think, really good money on a flip house, is if you can do most of it yourself. If you're paying other people to do the work, then your profit's going to be really low. Well, we had done the flip house, and it was in our neighborhood, and we were already starting to not be real happy with our neighborhood, and there was nothing. It was in kind of an area that people wanted to be in because it was near a lake, and we'd always enjoyed that lake also. But the neighborhood itself, we had some issues with some of our neighbors. Most of them were great people, and we loved them. We'd known them for years, but one of our neighbors committed a murder, and that was kind of shocking when you have a neighbor you've known for years and years. And at first, he wasn't owning up to it, saying it was an accident, but he had told some other neighbors. The way he had recounted the story to them made me think that, yeah, you did it. And so every day you see one and you're like, hey, I think you did it. How are you? That was awkward. And then we had another neighbor who had also, we'd known for years and years, and they'd had some marital difficulties, and she had, I think, got hooked on prescription drugs. But they were nice people. And one day I had left home, and she had, and this was all kind of going on at the same time we were flipping this house. I had left home, and she called me, and she said, hey, you left your garage door open. Do you want me to go over and shut it for you? Well, I was already getting a little nervous, suspicious of her, I guess you would say. And I said, no, I'm right around the corner. I'll be right back. And she goes, oh, well, I already put it down. Do you want me to go put it back up? And I said, no, I'm right around the corner. Well, I wasn't right around the corner, but I booked it back home. And when I got home, the door was down. I went inside the house, and there were some things missing, but it was odd things. It was prescription drugs, because that was the first place I went. I went straight to the medicine cabinet, and yep, there were some prescription drugs gone, and all our alcohol. And we kept our alcohol in an unusual place, so just a stranger could not have gone into our house and gone straight to that alcohol. So I knew it was someone who knew us, and she was the number one suspect. And we called the police to make a report because of the prescription drugs. My husband had had knee replacement surgery, and so he had some, I don't know, hydrocodone or something that he had never finished. And it was gone, and some other prescription painkillers were gone. And I think it was her, and she had left like one or two in each bottle. She didn't take them all, though you knew they were like half full. All of a sudden now there's like one. And I don't know if that was the thought, like, oh, well, they'll forget that they only had one left. No, we knew what was in there. And the police came, we made the report, but really there was nothing we could do other than install cameras. And told her we had installed cameras and that there were cameras inside and outside the home. And we never had any more problems, but that was sad. It was really sad because we'd known them a long time. It was, discouraging to say the least. So we've got the drug abuser, the soccer mom, prescription pill taker, and the probably murderer, who is definitely a murderer now because he's in jail. He took a plea deal for it. But we had all that going on while we were flipping this house, and it was really stressful to us, like, ugh. And so when we weren't at our house, we were down the street at this house we were flipping, and when we got done, it turned out fabulous, really pretty. In fact, we thought about moving into it and selling our house, but we didn't. We went ahead and sold it, and as a result of selling the flip house, I was looking at all the MLS listings online through Realtor.com and Zillow and all those places that you look to try to decide what to list the house at. And I'd had a couple of realtors come and look at it, and they had given me their thoughts on what it was worth, and I thought it was very low. And your interests aren't really aligned with a realtor's interests. I think Malcolm Gladwell has a piece in one of his books about that. They want to sell it fast and easy, and you want to get the maximum profit. And so I had decided to sell the house myself, so that's why I was doing all this research. And as I was doing the research, I came across a house that looked like what we had always been looking for. Now, you always have kind of a list in your mind of what you want. And we had a long list. We wanted at least 5 acres. We wanted it to have a water source, whether it was a creek, a pond, a well. We wanted a ranch-style house that we could age in place, no steps. And we were hoping it would have some architectural interest. We wanted it to have a shop, and we wanted it to have trees. Now, trees are really hard in our area. That will really run up the price of a property because there just aren't many trees here. It's mostly prairie. And so to find all of those things would be really difficult, and we'd been looking ever since my husband had retired from the fire department. Well, if you hold to a dream list, you'll never find it because there's no property that will ever meet all of your criteria. Just like if you're looking to marry someone, if your list is, oh, they must have red hair and blue eyes and be over 6'2" and make $200,000 a year and be a doctor and drive a Mercedes. If you have a long list, then there's no person that's going to meet that criteria. And of course, price was also on our list. And so when we ran across this house, I saw it in the middle of the night, and like 3 a.m, and I immediately texted it to my husband, and then he woke up a couple hours later and saw it, and as soon as I woke up, he's like, we got to go look at this house. And I agreed, but we were also in the process of selling this flip house. And we had a lot of interest, a lot of people coming to look at it. And I had just posted it on Facebook and ran an ad on Facebook for it and asked people to share it. But a lot of people knew about the house, especially in the neighborhood. They had come by and watched us as we worked on it and seen what we had done. And so a lot of people in town knew about this house. And we had several people come and look at it, and the first day we had a full price offer, and we were planning an open house that weekend, and I'm like, I just want to do the open house and see if we get any more offers. And immediately that person came back and said, I'll give you $7,000 over asking. And we accepted that. And we were already asking $40,000 more than the realtor had told us to ask. So we went ahead and made an appointment to go, we called a realtor to see the house that we were interested in the country, and the realtor called back and said, it's sold. And I'm like, well, that's all right, because we probably got too much on our plates anyway with selling this house. And then she called back the next day and said, it's up for sale again. That deal fell through. The guy that had attempted to buy it was a professional gambler with tax liens. So, and the realtor goes, there's going to be one showing from like 5 to 7, and she's just going to take the best offer because she's tired. We're like, okay. So we went out there and we walked in, and we were just like immediately like, this is it. This is the house. And it didn't have everything we wanted. It was on 5 acres. We had hoped to get 10 or 20. It was slightly over what we wanted to pay by like maybe, I don't know, $7,000 or something, but we'd had a really nice offer on our flip house. It had a creek that ran through it, and we thought it had a well, but it turns out it didn't. And it had a pond, but the pond had 42 trees growing in it, and it did not hold very much water. And it was very, very overgrown. But it was a mid-century modern house with a lot of windows, big windows, and it had lots and lots of trees, hundreds of trees. We've done nothing but cut down dead trees since we've lived here. And the creek was so pretty, and it had something that we had never even thought about getting us. It had a bridge. It had a bridge over the creek, and it was so charming. And as soon as I saw the bridge, I'm like, this is Bright Bridge Farm, because my husband's an electrician. It was the business he started after he left the fire department, and I thought, I know you're gonna light this thing up, so it's gonna be Bright Bridge Farm. And so we were pretty taken with it, but it was so dated. I mean, the house was probably built in the mid-70s, and everything was original, so very dated. But of course, that's what put it into our price range. And we had just flipped a house, so we were exhausted. And so the thought of flipping another one, because every house is a long-term flip, was slightly overwhelming. But we decided to go for it, and we went ahead and made an offer, and we went $7,000 over. And we thought, we got $7,000 more for the flip house than we were expecting, so we're going to go ahead and put it on this house. And they accepted, and that's how we got the house. Now, there for about a month, we had 3 house payments, because there was a gap between when the contract went through on the flip house. We still had our original house, and then we had this house. So I think for 1 month we had 3 payments. And we didn't want to put our house on the market right away, because we knew we were going to have to gut this homestead because it was so dated, that instead of doing it like a room at a time or trying to live in a construction zone, we just thought, no, we'll hang on to our house. Well, we hung on to it for a month, and we had ripped everything out of the homestead where we live now. And we thought, well, we should probably go ahead and list our house in case it takes a month or 2 to sell. And once again, I decided to sell that house myself. And it immediately sold. And once again, for more than asking. And so we went ahead and accepted that offer, but it meant that we had to live in our travel trailer for about 3 months. If I look back on it and I think, should we have waited a little longer? You can always look in hindsight. Hindsight's easy because you know the outcome, but we didn't know what the outcome would be. And we were nervous that we were going to be making 2 house payments for several months. And so I think it was still the right decision. And thankfully we had the travel trailer, so we had a place to live on the property. And it wasn't too bad. I mean, because we were working most of the time anyway. We'd come home from work and then work on the house, and every weekend work on the house. And some of it we hired out, and some of it we did ourselves. Probably did 50% ourselves and hired 50% out, because we didn't feel like we could flip it quick enough before, we were tired. Let me just put it that way. We were tired of working, and there's only so much work you can do. So that's what we did. Now, once we moved in, and the place was super overgrown. It had Asian honeysuckle had invaded the property. It was growing everywhere, and you couldn't even see the creek from the house because of all of this brush. And it just hadn't been maintained in a lot of years. So there was a lot of old and dying trees that needed cut down. And the bridge needed rebuilt, though the bridge, it had iron trusses under it. It's got like concrete piers and iron trusses, and we had a friend come look at it, and our friend was like, you rebuild this and you can drive a semi over it. And it did, but it cost like $5,000 just to rebuild that bridge. And the well that we thought was on the property turned out to be just over the line on the neighbor's property. Now, the reason we thought the well was on our property was because we could tell that there used to be a water line run from the house to the well. So this house used to be fed by that well, but at some point the people who owned the property had subdivided it and sold part of the land off, and the well ended up is now on the neighbor's property. But at least we had the creek, and we had a unusable pond. And we've been working on it 5 years. I mean, the house was done within 6-7 months. But a house is a never-ending project. Someone once told me a house is like a child that never grows up. It's always your dependent. And that has pretty much been my experience, is you will always find things that need done or that you want to do. This property didn't have a shop, and so we had to put up a shop building. So we didn't get everything we wanted, but it was in the area we wanted. It was the right price, and it had enough of what we were looking for that it made it just the perfect property for us. So my husband said, "You'll never regret it. We'll never regret buying this place." And really, we haven't regretted it at all, even though it's been a lot of work and there's still more work to be done. Last year was the first year I could even put in a garden, because everything was so overgrown. We eventually had to hire a guy. I mean, at first we were just like chainsawing and cutting every chance we had, but we finally just gave up and said we got to hire someone. And so we had a friend that had, I don't know what they call those, like a forestry mulcher. It's like a skid steer with a open-faced cutter on it, and he cut all the brush down, and that helped. Then we started working on the pond, and it's only this year that we finally got all the trees cut out of that pond and got it cleaned out, and we put bentonite in it, and we're waiting for spring rain to see if it holds water. So it's a long process. You're not gonna get a place and have it done in a day. It's gonna take years. And we hope that by the time we're officially retired, as we work towards that we can be way more self-sufficient, that it really is an off-grid homestead. Right now we're not off-grid yet. But we're looking at solar systems, and we plan on eventually adding solar, and we hope to grow as much of our own food as we can. We've been planting trees, though just like a fruit tree takes about 5 years before it produces. And I also planted a bunch of like blueberries and blackberries. But now I have to worry that with this exceedingly cold weather we had this week, I don't know if they even survived. Most plants like that are only rated to like 10, 20 below, and we had like 30 below temperatures for several days in a row. And it wasn't that wasn't the outside temperature, that was the wind chill, but I'm not sure the plants are established enough to weather that kind of extreme cold, so we'll wait till spring and find out. And even, I guess it's really my second year on my garden. My first year though, it was completely eaten by the deer, so we had to put up a fence around the garden. So it's just all learning, and it takes time, even though I grew up on a farm. And I know a lot about farm life, having lived on a farm when I was a little kid, and then my grandparents had big farms. My dad is still a farmer. So even with all of that, there's a lot to learn, and it's fun. It's really fun and enjoyable. And when we bought this house, a neighbor came over and asked to see it. He's like, "Hey, can I see what you did?" We're like, okay. So he came in. It turned out he was a real estate agent. He's like, "If you ever want to sell it, you know." And as he left, he said, "You know, you're living the American dream, don't you?" And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "Everyone wants to be a homesteader. Everyone wants to live on 5 acres and be self-sufficient and have some distance from everyone else. That's the new American dream. Everyone that comes to me, that's what they want." And I don't doubt him, because that's what we wanted. And it's more peaceful. It's very peaceful where we live. And we enjoy it. So that's the story of how we got our homestead. And keep watching my videos. We're going to keep cooking. We're going to keep learning to make lots of different things. We're going to garden. We're going to get the tractor out in the spring and plow more garden. And we're going to keep just moving along. We'll see if that pond finally holds water. And we have lots of animals out here, so you'll get to see lots of wildlife. You'll get to see my dog and my cats, and just everything that kind of goes on a 5-acre homestead. But I will say this, 5 acres is enough. 5 acres is enough that you can be pretty self-sufficient. We don't have animals, and that's the one thing people always ask me, "Why don't you get a cow? Why don't you get pigs? Why don't you get chickens?" Well, let me briefly tell you why. 5 acres isn't enough to support cattle, because my dad raised cattle and hogs. And we don't eat very much meat or eggs. And so it really, even if we had enough land, I'm not sure I would want to raise those, because we eat so little meat. And chickens, having grown up around chickens, I just don't really want to take care of chickens. Even though eggs have gotten very expensive, there's probably 20 people within a 5-mile radius of me that sell eggs, and they sell them cheap. $1.50, $2 a dozen, and I only use about a dozen eggs a month. And so there's really not a financial reason to have chickens, because we don't eat that much meat or eat that many eggs. And I have people close by I can buy them from. I did look at bees, but bees are livestock. They take a ton of work. And I have a neighbor that raises bees. And so when I need honey, I walk over to his house and buy honey from him. And there's a lot of investment in beekeeping, and you have to have a lot of knowledge to raise bees, a lot of knowledge. And it's hard work, really hard work. And so we just made a decision to not have animals. And even for chickens, they have to have a house, and they have to have an enclosed yard. They're real susceptible to diseases. So I don't regret not having chickens or bees. And we really don't have the option for probably cattle or hogs, and we don't eat that much. So that's why we don't have those particular animals, for everyone who asks. But we do lots of other things that I think you'll find interesting. If you live in a city, this is probably a whole different lifestyle. And sometimes it's just interesting to see how other people live. So follow along, and we'll have some fun.